This is a question which I get asked quite a lot, usually in private messages. People send me messages, ask about what kind of camera and stuff I'm using, and a particular message a couple of days ago just has spurred me to make this video because I've been meaning to for a while. Basically the question is, and I'll cut in a little clip of the question just here, what kind of camera I'm using and whether I'm using any effects to get the look that I have in this video. The camera I'm using to record most of the stuff that you'll see on YouTube is a Sanyo Zacti HD2000. It's, as far as small HD cameras go, relatively good in low light. It's got various different recording formats, so various 1080p formats, interlaced and progressive, various frame rates, and the same goes down for 720p and so on. So it's a nice little camera, and as a camera I recommend it if anyone's looking for one. It's a couple of years old, so you might be able to pick up a cheapish one on eBay. As a side note, I know my brother did recently, and he got a reasonably good deal with several batteries thrown in and several SD cards. In most of the videos that you'll see, I'll be using this camera, and indeed in the particular video that this person had commented on, which was the Meiji Shrine composition lesson that I did, I was using this camera. Now in the setup that I had just here, I was just playing guitar in the Meiji Shrine Park, and kind of wanting to be discreet, I just set the camera up and proceeded to talk to myself in the middle of the park. I set the levels as best I could. The screen on the Zacti is okay for kind of setting up a shot, but you can't see an awful lot of detail. It's a fairly low resolution screen, certainly compared to some of the screens on, for example, the T2i 550D or on an iPhone 4. So I set the shot up. When I ingested the footage back into my computer, I realised that the sky was completely blown out, and I didn't really like the way that I looked. I looked a bit red and flushed. My face and my hair kind of looked a bit washed out. The guitar is about the only thing that came out okay. The trees in the background look a little bit washed out because of the sky, and they look a little bit kind of greyed. So in order to get the footage to the stage that you actually see on YouTube, I used Magic Bullet looks. Now I ended up using an awful lot of filters stacked on top of one another to get the particular look that we end up with. So I've been playing the footage of this whilst you've been listening to me talk, and now I'm going to cut into a screenshot of what I did in Magic Bullet looks. So we're on the screen here. Now the particular look that I used might have been one of the presets to start with, although I honestly can't remember whether it was or not. There are loads and loads of presets. Whether it was or whether it wasn't is somewhat beside the point because of all the things I had to do to bring the image into check. So I'm going to give you a flash of what the final image looked like. That's what we end up with. And as you can see in this, the sky has got some of its blues back. It looks like it's got some kind of graduated filter applied to it. The trees are slightly darker, the greens are a little bit greener. I myself am darker, my hair's darker, my face has been boosted in the contrast, so my eyes are a little bit dark. I'm not entirely sure that I like the way that's come out, but it was about as good as I could get it at the time, although I like to think my skills with grading have improved. I don't know whether I could do much of a better job now even. And then you can see in various areas it's still quite blown out, so on my hand just there it's quite blown out, whereas before, if you flick back, it wasn't quite so blown out. But the sky and the rest of the image is certainly brought well into check. Now what I'm going to do is take off the filters one by one just so you can see what they achieve. Now a lot of this is to do with how the filters work together, so by taking them off we learn a little bit, but you have to bear in mind it's to do with the whole lot. Now the really important filters that I added myself, if I did build this on top of a look, like I said, I can't remember, with a vignette, and you can see that makes a huge difference to the sky. I actually usually add a vignette to a lot of my videos. I quite like the way it looks. It tends to focus the whole image in towards wherever the centre of the vignette is positioned, whether that's the centre of the screen or off to one side, so it focuses the viewer's attention. And in this case it is, and I'll zoom out so you can see this, quite a large vignette, so we're just getting the top arc coming in over the sky, missing my head somewhat. I didn't want to bring it too low because if I did, then it would obviously darken my face and that would look a little bit strange. So that's how the vignette was working out. Now on top of that I have a couple of spot exposures added in, and as you can see those spot exposures just help to darken the corners of the image just here, and then I've got a grad exposure over the whole lot coming down. Now the graduated exposure just there has actually got a hint of blue in it, and that hint of blue really just brought the sky back in a bit. It doesn't look entirely natural, but I think that it looks a lot better than it did when the sky was completely blown out. Now I'm just going to go through and take the filters out one by one, starting on this side. So we've got the contrast first. Now in this situation the contrast is actually reduced to start with. That flattens the image out a bit and allows you a little bit more leeway when you're grading. I'm not an expert on grading, but from everything I've learnt, it seems like a lot of the grades within looks and a lot of people who are grading will actually start off with a contrast filter to knock the contrast down a bit. On a camera like the Zacti, it tends to record things and make them pop a little bit, so it's got quite a lot of contrast built into the image, as it were, coming straight out of the camera. If I was shooting this now using my Canon 550D T2i, then I might well record this with a flat picture style, which wouldn't do anything to flatter the image. It wouldn't be over contrasty. In fact, it would look quite nasty at the camera even, but it would give you a lot more to work with. So in this situation, the contrast being brought down first of all, take that out. Saturation is also reduced at the front end just here. Three-way color corrector, and as you can see instantly just there, when the saturation mask there is taken off, everything looks far too saturated. My face is all red. The trees look quite nice, but everything else is just a little bit unnatural. We take off the three-way color corrector and we see that the sky turns from being blue to being rather yellow. So three-way color corrector there is bringing quite a lot of blues back in, and it also helps to sharpen up the greens a bit. With the yellowness in there, they look a little bit, I don't know, nasty. So that's what the color corrector is doing. Take that off. Grad exposures off, and the spot exposures off. Vignette off. Curves are an extremely powerful tool. When I made this video, I didn't really understand how to use them that well. So this is pretty much one of the standard curves that were built in. Might be the film style curve. So in this one, you can see that it's adding a little bit to the top and high end and dropping a little bit off the bottom end. In the greens, it's scooping a bit at the bottom out and a little bit at the middle by the looks of it. Reds are pretty much flat and the blues are pretty much flat. Let's take that off. Now you have to bear in mind that all of these are stacking together, so individually they don't make the image. Warm cool, and this one's set to cool things down, warm things up a little bit. So if we take that out, it should look a little bit cooler, and it does. At that point, it's probably bringing a little bit more life back into my face, because if we applied all the other effects, it could well make me look a little bit blue and a little bit drawn. So that one is giving me a bit of blood, which is nice, makes me look human. Take that one off, and spot exposure just here. I added that one just about last, I think, even though it's just here in the chain, just to bring my face back up, because with everything else that was applied, obviously my face was starting to get dropped a bit in the background, so it just helped to bring me to the front, and in combination with the vignette that worked quite well. So we take that off. Color contrast, and we can see that makes a huge difference just there. At the end of the video just here, I'll just switch that one on and off, and you'll see that that actually makes the image pretty much. And then the range saturation. This one is a little bit more subtle, you can't really tell. If you look at the right hand side just here, you'll see that the shadows have been upped, so there's more saturation, more colour saturation in the darker colours, slightly less in the midtones and even less in the highlights. I've messed around with this actually a bit when I've been just going over this video, and I'm thinking that maybe I'd like the highlights to have a bit more saturation, but as we've added everything earlier in the chain, we'd have to go back and adjust that, because if we bring that up now, it will make everything else unbalanced and seem a bit unnatural. So that's with nothing on at all, and we'll just go back and add things in from the other end this time. Just do this quickly. So you can see, by adding those two in, the image has been flattened down compared to what it was before, where it's relatively contrasty. That's flattened it, and then we go to work, adding some blues back in, adding the grad exposure, the spot exposures to darken the sky. The vignette darkens it even further, focuses it in. Curves just add a bit of contrast and a slight colour correction. The warm cool adds a bit of life back in. Spot exposure on my face to bring it up. Here comes the big one, the colour contrast. Brings the whole image back together again, perhaps a little bit too contrasty. And then the range saturation, you'd be hard pressed to see the difference that that's making, but I like to think that there was a difference. We always do these things and then realise that it made no difference at all. So that's my workflow. Magic Bullet Looks is an extremely powerful program. I use it to the best of my abilities, but again, I'm no expert. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, I recommend you check out Philip Bloom, because he's got some interesting videos on colour correction, and his videos are interesting in general, so perhaps have a look through. I might try and place a link somewhere down below to take you to one of the videos he made on colour correction, actually specifically using Magic Bullet Looks, and that was one of the catalysts for me actually getting this program. This works incidentally as a plugin within Final Cut, so they do other versions for other platforms. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's by Red Giant Software, so if you are interested, it's a relatively expensive program, but they do other smaller programs, and you can actually get Magic Bullet's Colorista 1 for free if you're a little bit interested. Now, a lot of the things that you're doing here with color correction can be done within a program like Final Cut Express, Final Cut Pro, Adobe Premiere. You don't always have so much control over elements like the vignettes and the spot exposures. You might just have, for example, a three-way color corrector and possibly an overall vignette or something. This one's nice because it gives you a very intuitive user interface. There are lots of good presets built in that you can use to build on, and then if you want to get into color correction a bit more, you could use a more complicated program like Apple Color, for example, which having looked at on some friends' computers, it's just crazy. You have to really know what you're doing to get good results from that. Whereas this has a lot of presets and you can kind of fumble your way around it as you learn it. I hope this video has been useful for some of you. I know that a lot of you won't really be interested in this kind of stuff, so I hope it hasn't been too boring. You probably turned off by now anyway. And then, yes, I'll just leave you with a couple of comparison videos, if I haven't already cut them in, of some of the other colour corrections that I've done.